Good morning, Sabbath School. All right. Good to see you up and at 'em. Those of you who are out in the foyer, we want to encourage you to move into the sanctuary so you can join our Sabbath School class. We are coming down to the end of the year, aren't we? We're coming down to the end of the year. All right. I want to welcome you to the Albany Seventh-day Adventist Church for our Sabbath School class. We're going to be looking at lesson number 12 today in our quarterly. Before we do, though, I invite you to bow your heads and let's have prayer as we begin. Gracious Father in heaven, we thank you for your blessings, your goodness, your patience with us. We thank you that you've granted us another Sabbath when we can come and worship you. We thank you for the opportunity of opening your word. We thank you for your Holy Spirit that is present, and we ask for his leading and guiding as we consider and study and share with each other. We ask that you would also be with your people around the world. Bless and protect each one. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. If you picked up a bulletin, there is an insert in the bulletin that focuses on the mission focus of this quarter. We don't talk as much about 13th Sabbath offering as we used to, but next Sabbath is 13th Sabbath. And as I understand it, the 13th Sabbath offering is directed towards a specific project that the World Church has chosen. And I have had the opportunity as a child, when my parents were living and working overseas, of living and working at places that were the recipient of a 13th Sabbath offering. And this quarter, the offering is going to the West Central Africa Division, which is where my old stomping grounds were as a kid, in Nigeria. That's where I grew up, was in Nigeria, Ghana, Nigeria. And the offering, the 13th Sabbath offering, is going, number one, to Ghana, to build an educational facility there, and then also in the Cameroons. I've also been to the Cameroons as a child. We went up there one time, and I'll tell you a story sometime about the ostrich that we chased in the Cameroons. But this is where the offering is going. So you can read this. It gives you a little bit of an idea as to what's it all about, and what your offering can do for your World Church members around the world. All right. Lesson 12 today is focusing on an interesting subject. When I was going through the quarterly and I came to lesson 12, I thought, whoa, wait a minute. Did we make a mistake here? Did we get the wrong lesson, wrong topic? Because I certainly didn't think about the story of Esther and Mordecai as a natural part of the topic of mission. But after having gone through the study and spent some time with the book of Esther, I actually think they made a good decision in terms of the study for today. The time frame of this study is within the context of the Babylonian captivity. Most of you, I think, know enough about church history to know, or the history of Israel, is that they had high times and they had low times, and typically it was in relationship to idolatry. Finally, things got so bad that God decided that they needed some time away, if you will. We would maybe call it some time in the corner, or some quiet time on the chair to think about things. And so God used Nebuchadnezzar to come and basically conquer Israel, and there was a significant number of people who were taken back to Babylon. Who were four of those people? Yeah, Daniel and his three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel. And certainly those four gentlemen had some amazing experiences. One of the experiences that Daniel had was he was very much a key player in terms of the interpretation of the vision that, or the dream that God gave Nebuchadnezzar that we call, you know, the image dream. And what we know from that dream is that the head represented who? Babylon, okay. The shoulders of silver represented who? Medo-Persia. So the story of Esther and Mordecai is in the era of the shoulders, the silver, during the era of the Medes and the Persians. As best I can tell, Mordecai is a fourth generation captive. So his great-great-grandfather, I believe, would have been the one who was taken from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar back to Babylon. 4 generations now later, we have Mordecai, but there's also been a change in terms of who's in charge now. Instead of the Babylonians, it's now the Medes and the Persians. So that's just kind of a backup here. Now, the book of Esther, there are basically 4 people at play in the story. One is a king by the name of King Ahasuerus. The other is his prime minister, a gentleman by the name of who? Haman. Then there's Mordecai, gentleman there in the middle bottom. And then his niece, cousin, yes, cousin. You're right, I think it's cousin, Esther. Now, the focus of the lesson this week is on cross-cultural ministry. Cross-cultural ministry. So let me ask you to begin with, what is your definition of culture? Everybody believing the same thing?
That's one group, yes.
Okay. Okay, I'll give you a point there. Yeah. Anybody else have an idea? Culture, thoughts? What is culture? Upbringing. Okay. Traditions. Okay. Yeah, I think those are all good. Culture basically is a word that helps us focus on what it is that makes a group of people be able to function together. How do they interact? Who is in charge and who is not? Who is responsible for this and who is not responsible? How many of you have lived in a different culture than what you grew up in? Okay. Yeah. Okay. How many of you have heard of culture shock? Yes. I've experienced culture shock in more than one way, more than one time in my life. The greatest culture shock that I ever experienced was when I came back to this country. I was stunned. I couldn't believe people lived the way they lived. Culture can be very different, even within a country. Is there a difference in culture in our own country? Yeah, absolutely. You go back east, I can hardly understand sometimes what those people are saying, let alone the way they do things. It's different, okay? Oh, is that okay? So culture is very, can be very jarring sometimes. If you don't know what's going on, it can be confusing, it can be intimidating or whatever else. Now, are we dealing with an issue of culture shock in the story of Esther and Mordecai? Careful. Are we dealing with an issue of culture shock in the story of Esther and Mordecai? I'm going to say no. Because they have grown up in this culture. Now, is it their culture? There's a difference. Yes, in the back.
Difference in culture in being a civilian and being a queen.
Oh my goodness, yes. That's an interesting one. I hadn't even thought about that. But yes, okay, huge culture. The culture of the court versus the culture of outside. Okay, yes, there'd be a big change there. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that in the story that we're looking at, Mordecai and Esther are very familiar with the culture that they are living in. But are they necessarily is that necessarily their culture? No, it is not. So let me ask you this question. Do you live in a culture that is not necessarily your culture? Yes, okay? Because you have values and you view the world and you view people differently than the culture at large does. At least you should. As Christians, we should be different than our culture. We understand our culture. We know how to operate in our culture. We know what is acceptable in our culture, but we should be living at a different level. Is it possible for the culture of heaven to be present in this culture of a sinful world? Hopefully so. Hopefully that is the impact that you are all having wherever you are. Okay. Now, one of the points that was brought out here, and point number one, all Christians are strangers in a foreign land. Do you agree with that? Yeah, you should. You should. Because this is not our what? It's not our home. That's exactly right. These are not our values. But we have to live within this context. We have to move within this context. We have to interact within this context. But as we do, people should recognize that there is something fundamentally different. And let me ask you this question. Have you ever had anybody make that observation to you in your interaction with them?
All of them?
Yeah. You know, I've had people, just random people, interacting, getting something or whatever else, and they'll say, "Are you a Christian?" I mean, I don't have anything, I don't wear a cross, I don't have anything on me that would identify me as a Christian. And yet people recognize that, or should or can recognize that in relationship to our interaction with each other. Okay, now, the story of Esther and Mordecai. Esther is orphaned. Mordecai assumes responsibility for her. She is raised as his daughter. We know absolutely nothing about Mordecai's situation. Is he married? A widower? Are there other children? Silence. We have no record of anything in relationship to Mordecai. But it does appear that he loved Esther and raised her as his daughter. And she became a very, very attractive woman. The other thing that we know is that Mordecai worked in the king's gate. Now let me ask you this question. What do you think that means, the king's gate? What does the king's gate represent?
Access to the king.
Coming in and out.
Okay, it could be checking who's coming in and out. He's the immigration officer who's checking you got the right stamp on your passport and things like that. Possibly. I'm gonna expand that and say that the king's gate is a term that simply refers to all of the bureaucracy in its many different forms that allows a king's empire to operate. So what does that mean? Well, that means that Mordecai could have filled a number of functions in terms of his service to the king. Let me ask you this question. Do you think Mordecai was a person of low, middle, or high rank in the government? Do you think high?
Middle.
Middle, I'm kind of inclined to think middle. That was kind of where I put him. Low to middle, somewhere in that range. Not the gopher necessarily, but he was a mid-level in operation person. Do you think his job was flashy?
No.
I don't think so either. My guess is that Mordecai was a conscientious worker. He reported to work on time. He put in a full day's work. He was loyal to the king. But I think Mordecai also recognized that this was not his king. But he recognized the importance of the king. Okay? Now, the story is a little complicated because somewhere along the line, two things happen. Haman appears in the story, and he somehow gains favor with the king and ends up being promoted to a fairly high-ranking position, maybe even second to the king himself. So he would be very high in rank. The story identifies Haman as being a what? Jim, you get 2 points. Very good. Haman is an Agagite. I'm looking here for my notes, trying to find this here, that I'm trying to get this here, make sure I get it straight here. Get too many things going here. So what is the significance of this identification as an Agagite? Okay, here it is. Haman is an Amalekite. Now let me ask you a question. This is a Bible trivia question. Who were the first people to attack Israel after they escaped from Egypt?
Amalekites.
I've given you the answer already.
The Amalekites.
The Amalekites. Very good, you get a point. Okay, so they have escaped from Egypt. They've gone across the Red Sea. They're a totally disorganized group of people. They have no defenses to speak of. And the Amalekites, who are living down in the Negev desert area, they look at this and they say, wow, this is a golden opportunity. And they are the first people to attack the Israelites. Now, do you remember the story of Saul, who was supposed to wipe out a certain people? And instead of doing that, what did he do? Two things he did. He didn't destroy all the livestock, which he was supposed to do.
And he took them as slaves.
And he also what? He spared the life of King Agag, I think is how you say it. Who is Haman? Haman claims, and probably was, a direct descendant of King Agag, who was an Amalekite. The interesting thing about this story is, look at how far out this war between God and Satan goes. It never stops. And here you now have Haman, who actually in some places that I read, he actually claimed direct descendancy to the royal throne back. And, oh, by the way, who was the man who, do you remember the story where David picks up Goliath's sword and somebody reports to Saul, and Saul ends up going down there and he wipes out all the Levites? Who was that? Another Agag. This is an enemy of Israel. Of course, who's behind all that? Satan. Okay, so this goes on in this story here, that we got this Haman guy now, and he is out there, and he is demanding that people bow to him and worship him. He actually, there's records also that indicate that he actually viewed himself as having some divine characteristics also. Mordecai is not willing to do that. Why is he not willing to do that?
Because he already has a God.
Because he already has a God. That's exactly right. Now, there's another element to this story that's interesting. Oh, yeah. There's this story here. I forgot about this one. Mordecai, in his role, and in whatever capacity he served, the king, he becomes aware of what? He becomes aware of a plot against the king. Two of the high-ranking whoever, they are plotting to take the king's life. The king's life is spared. Why? Because Mordecai tells who what?
Esther.
Tells Esther, and Esther then communicates that to the king, and the incident is checked out, and in fact found to be correct, and the king's life is spared.
This was before Esther.
Pardon?
This was before Esther. He couldn't sleep that he read in the history that this had happened, and he asked how Mordecai had been rewarded.
Did this happen before Esther? Oh, I'd have to go back and read that then. I thought he reported it to Esther.
He did.
He did
That's what I thought. Anyway, somehow it got to. Okay. Now, there's two things now that I want to segue to in terms of, again, we're looking at cross-cultural ministry. This is a complicated story to try to keep it all straight so that you actually end up with some points of value. Okay. When Esther is, okay, I'm gonna go off two rabbit trails here at the same time. When Esther is taken to participate in the search for a new queen, what is it that Mordecai instructs her not to do? Exactly. She is to keep her nationality secret. So let me ask you this question. What is the lesson that we learn here in relationship to cross-cultural ministry?
There is a time for everything.
There is a time to identify, and there's a time to be an incognito. How many of you are familiar with Frontier Missions? Okay? Frontier Missions. It's based in Berrien Springs. It's a nonprofit organization. It is independent ministry. And what they do is they support individuals who feel called to go and live in areas where there is very few, if any, Christians, to have an influence for Christianity in those areas. Many of those countries where these people serve are hostile to Christianity. So what is their modus operandi? Do they go in there and say, you know, we're here from the Seventh-day Adventist Church, etc., or we believe this or that? No. They're undercover, so to speak. And I've known some of these people and interacted with them. And it's awkward because you can't communicate with them directly because there's people checking their mail or their emails or whatever else. You have to be very circumspect in terms of what you talk about. I had an occasion one time to be in one of these countries with one of these types of people, one of these missionaries, and we were in a vehicle with a driver, and before this individual would talk about what they were doing, she spent some time talking with the driver. And she determined pretty quickly that he didn't understand English, which then made it possible for us to have conversation without necessarily having to worry about him understanding. So the principle that I think the lesson is wanting us to recognize here is that we never want to be ashamed of being a Christian. But we need to be very wise about how we identify ourselves at times. Because identifying yourself as such could effectively what? Close the door. Sometimes we are more effective if people don't know who we are. But nevertheless, we know what we need to say or take a stand for. They may put it all together eventually. Well, yeah, right, of course, we do need to listen, but we need to be aware of what's going on. Okay, so.
We are the salt of the earth, right?
Yes.
But we can also be too salty.
Yes, I knew where you were going on that one. Yes, a little salt goes a long ways, and it's very, very important. There's certain food I cannot handle without salt in it. But if you overdo the salt, it's a bad thing. Yeah. Yes, Richard.
Sometimes we have people knocking on our door
Yes,
and they're trying to,
proselytize. Yeah,
and immediately we know what they're doing.
yeah,
And it turns off a lot of people.
yeah. Yeah, again, sometimes subtlety is a much better approach than frontal. Yes, George, again.
That's why we have 2 ears to listen and we only have one mouth, so.
Some of us could do better with even more than 2 ears, couldn't we? And some of us would do better with less than one mouth too, maybe. Okay, so, you know, the principle that I think we need to keep in mind when it comes to cross-cultural interactions is listen, be observant, don't be in a rush, and sometimes just be quiet. Go about your work, do it in a responsible way, and look for opportunities as they present. Now, back to this here situation. I've already alluded to this, but did Mordecai was a Jew. I don't know why he was still in Medo-Persia. You know, an option had been given to go back to Israel, to rebuild the temple, to rebuild Jerusalem. But for whatever reason, Mordecai had not gone back. We don't know why. Now, when Mordecai becomes aware of this plot against the king, what were his options?
Say nothing.
It's not my business. It's outside my department. King's got people to take care of him. I'm going to stay out of this. But that's not what he did. What did he do?
He reported it to Esther, and Esther then.
He took steps to protect the king. That's exactly right. Now, in that culture, when you did something like this, what was typically the response?
Be honored, but in this case, it was in the record, but there was no honor.
There would be some kind of reward, if you want, Will. Some type of acknowledgement for what you have done. And in the case of the king, I mean, he has a lot at stake. In this case, as already has been stated, it got recorded and somehow forgotten. Other things took priority and it never got dealt with. Is there any indication that Mordecai took offense at that?
No.
No.
No. Did it change the way he worked? No.
Doesn't seem to.
Doesn't appear to. Did it change his interaction with Esther and the royal court?
No.
Not that we know of. In other words, the fact that Mordecai was not acknowledged at this point in time didn't change how he operated. It didn't affect his values. I have seen situations in which people have become quite offended because something or somebody didn't acknowledge them a certain way. And the result of their effectiveness has not gone up, it's gone down. And what I see here in Mordecai is a person who has values, and he's going to be true to those values, regardless of whether or not he's acknowledged or not. Now, We then have the story, the point of the story where things get real hot. Haman gets his eye on Mordecai. He becomes aware of the fact that Mordecai is not giving him the honor that he thinks he deserves. He discovers that Mordecai is a Jew. He hates Jews. Oh, here's something I just forgot to tell you about. The Amalekites. The Amalekites are, here it is, right here. The Amalekites are from the family of Esau. Yeah, way back. But it's all family. Think about that. Now let me ask you a question. What was the relationship between Esau and Jacob? Did Esau love? Was there any love between Esau and Jacob? Absolutely none. As a matter of fact, Esau said he was going to kill his brother. Okay. So this hatred of God's people goes right back to the very root of the family. Like I said, it's amazing, the story. I'm sorry, I digressed there on that one, but I wanted you to know that. Okay, so we now have this story where Haman is after Mordecai, and we end up with Haman buying off the king, saying that he'll give the king somewhere around $15 million for the privilege of killing off all the Jews. And the way Haman phrases it sounds to the king like this is probably a good deal. I mean, these apparently are people who are not working for him. They're against him. Let's get rid of them. You're going to take care of it. Fine, it's done. So here's my stamp. Go ahead and do it. Mordecai, when he learns about this, what does he do?
Sent a message to Esther.
Yep, exactly. Let me ask you this question. Is it good to have connections in high places?
Yes.
Is it good to have family in high places? Oh yeah, it's even better. Okay? And Mordecai communicates to Esther what's going on. And this is where I believe the character of people truly is manifest, is when a crisis like this presents. And Mordecai appeals to Esther to make petition to the king. The problem is that there's certain cultural rules of palace etiquette that limit what she can and can't do. She may be queen, but she's subservient accordingly. But she chooses that she decides that she is going to go before the king. What does Esther do, though, before she does that? You're way ahead of us. What does she do?
She prayed and fasted.
She prayed and fasted. That's exactly right. So what is the lesson we learn from here?
She prayed and fasted, asked for the Jews to fast also. Then she invited the king to a banquet.
Okay?
So, I think that she does the exact same thing that Mordecai did when he reported the conspiracy. He understood that this was not about him. but rather that he had been put in a position where he could do something. God had revealed something to him, and he had a responsibility to take action.
Okay?
I think she did the same thing, and she understood that after her action, it was in God's hands what the result was.
Okay. So she actually did two things. First of all, she and Mordecai put together a plan. And they also prayed. And I think that is something that is always good to remember. And that is that we can plan, we can have the best plans, we can have the best people involved in the planning. But at the end of the day, we still need what? We still need God's presence, power, guidance. And that is something that we access through prayer. That's exactly right. Now, one of the things about the story of Esther that I think is so amazing is the sense of humor that God has. You know, Haman thought he was pretty hot stuff. Haman thought that everybody needed to be bowing to him. There was only one person Haman could think about, and that was himself. And so, when God's Spirit kept the king up all night, and he ends up having his historical records being read to him, and he discovers that Mordecai has not been honored for the service of saving the king's life when there was a plot against his life, and Haman shows up, well, the king asks his number two person a very logical question. What should I do for the person who I would like to honor? And the only person Haman can think about is himself. And Haman steps in it big time. And so you have the person who is conspiring to take down take down Mordecai, actually having to honor Mordecai. And like I said, to me, it's an example of God's humor. You think you're hot stuff. Let me show you who's in charge. We know the story. Esther approaches the king. The king is actually delighted to see her. She's honored with an invitation to approach. She invites him and Haman again walks directly into a trap, and at the end of the day, his plot is exposed. So, the point, I think, of our lesson today is that we have to recognize that we live in a foreign culture in many ways, because we all live in work in different places. We need to be intelligent about what we broadcast. Silence is sometimes a good thing. But as we move forward in whatever crisis or opportunities or challenges that we face, it is appropriate for us to plan accordingly, but to always move forward within the context of prayer. Because it is within that context that God can actually bless us and expand our work and make our work effective. Let us never forget that God's goal for Israel is the same as it is for us today. I will also give you as a light to the Gentiles, that you should be my salvation to the ends of the earth. To all people. And as you go about your work, as you go about your interaction, as you engage people, regardless of their culture, recognize it as an opportunity to be a witness for a God who loves us and to a God who is wanting us to share him with other people. Let us pray. Father in heaven, we thank you for the story of Esther and Mordecai. We find ourselves sometimes in similar situations, and I pray that you will help give us wisdom, that we will effectively represent you in all that we say and do. Bless us as we continue to worship you this Sabbath. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.